stories like crazy, because everyone has mental health and everyone has a story, and sometimes they're crazy. Join Lori Lane Murphy and me, Adriana Prosser, as we talk about dealing with, struggling with, and managing mental health with storytellers who want to share their true life story. Get in the conversation with us and talk to us on Facebook and Twitter and subscribe on YouTube. Now, let's smash some stigma. This week we talked to Marlena, who tells us the story about her going through her diagnosis and also struggling to come to terms with a word that we might all use sometimes, the word broken. And sometimes we have to break relationships when we break apart and come back together again. Here, let's have a listen.
So in November of 2014, without having any prior history of mental illness, I began to change. My speech was broken. I was normally an articulate person. I had just published a book, actually, and suddenly I was speaking in broken sentences. My sleep patterns were all over the place, and some friends started to comment, "Are you doing okay?" But after having that awkward conversation, they'd usually just stop calling. And I was in denial. I was terrified of being flawed. I wanted to be cool, and my family heavily stigmatized mental illness. My greatest fear was having one. It wasn't until having a regular doctor's appointment that I realized that there was something wrong with me. My attentive family doctor booked an appointment with CAMH while I was in her office. She said, "You're not talking straight, and I know something's not right." My boyfriend of 6.5 years just gave up on me. He began sleeping in another room, and I was afraid of telling him what people had been saying, that I was somehow suddenly broken. In January, I got the courage. I walked into the room and I said, "There's something wrong with me, and I'm going to CAMH." And he looked up at me and he said, "I can't join you in this journey." He said, "I'm tired of being embarrassed of you." And that started a terrible chain reaction that almost broke me. He moved out and I was in complete isolation. My mother was afraid I would say something embarrassing on social media in this state, so all of my social media was deleted. I was alone and completely isolated in my apartment. My work was largely based on social interaction, and all the calls for work had stopped. I was out of work. Because of the breakup, I was convinced that I was somehow being punished for not being perfect enough. So every appointment that I went to for the doctors, I dressed perfectly. Makeup, hair, perfect. Not that I wanted to do all that effort, but I was afraid not to do it. Doctors know that with mental health symptoms, one of the first things to go is a lack of personal grooming. So this behavior caused me to be misdiagnosed many times. Doctors dismissed what I was telling them because I was going in their office looking, dressed to the nines. I was desperate to become well again, and so I did so many things to do so. Since I was so ashamed of what I was experiencing, I kept vital information from my doctor as well. Not only that, I was so overwhelmed I couldn't articulate my experiences. As an actor, I pretended and I hid that I was okay for as long as I could to certain people. Every now and then I would break and I would tell people, "I'm afraid to leave my house. I'm afraid to talk to anyone. I'm up all night and I can barely sleep." Once I forced CAMH to admit me. And at the time I had become convinced that if I just got all of my affairs in order, that I would be well again. So while being admitted to CAMH, I got a day pass and I renewed my passport. I got my driver's license, not behind the vehicle, just the written test, and renewed my health card. And when the doctors asked me what I did that day, they were so shocked. And they said, "Even I haven't done those things, so you mustn't be very sick." And they discharged me. There were very few people that came to visit. My then ex-boyfriend must have felt guilty, but he also didn't want the responsibility of taking care of someone who was sick. So he did come to visit once, and he called up people, as many as he could, to come and visit me. People that I hadn't spoken to in years started contacting me. Yet others, my closest circle of friends, didn't. And it was confusing to me. Some of my best friends dropped off the face of the planet like I never existed. My best friend refused to see me, and if I made any complaints of feeling unwell, she would just simply call 911 because she didn't want to have the conversation with me. And police would cart me away like a criminal. So also, even though I was terribly afraid, I was always very compliant to my doctors. I had tried many medications that were switched over and over and over. I had many scans, and after months, I finally got a CT scan and a PET scan. One of the doctors mentioned that I had a small cyst on my pineal gland, which may have been causing some of my behavior. After about a year of medication, doctors, and scans, I had actually snapped out of my breakdown. My doctor at McMaster told me that it was extremely rare for this to happen. I had students studying my file to gain knowledge on how people can get out of psychosis. Despite how the media portrays individuals with psychosis, I always remained gentle and kind. I was just frightened. I was desperate for conversation, only there was no one around because everyone was too afraid to be around me. When I broke out of my psychosis and became well, I came to realize that I had almost no friends. I had no job. I had no boyfriend. I had literally lost everything. My apartment, everything that had meaning in my life, that I had worked so hard to get, and I now had to rebuild. It was like waking up from a nightmare, realizing that you're in a nightmare. I no longer cared about being cool at this point. I just wanted to be cared about. I promised myself to now limit interaction with people who just wanted to share good times, because that's how it got so bad, I think. If people were willing to have difficult conversations with me early on and stick it through, perhaps my breakdown wouldn't have gotten to be so severe. Perhaps early intervention would have prevented me from losing everything that I cared about. It didn't have to be this bad. Life didn't have to change completely as I knew it. But here's the great news, is that I have rebuilt my life. I have fought and rebuilt my life. I continue to see the doctor and take medication. I continue to be open to new diagnoses and new treatments. I have worked very hard to get a sustainable career. I've got new friends who don't judge me for ever having a mental illness, and I'm very, very careful of those that I keep close to me. I let go of people that do not seem to come through when times are hard. I hold close to those that have shown me courage during difficult times. Even during the pandemic, I have optimism for my future now. After my breakdown, I had to make many hilarious calls. Hey, sorry about running away from you at the coffee shop. I thought the government was chasing me. And some people understood, and others have completely deleted me from Facebook and disinvited me from dinners that they had annually. I learned that my greatest fight for my own well-being is being open about my mental health, because keeping secrets will only prolong your symptoms and keep you sick. If you don't have people around you that accept you for who you are, including your mental illness, it could literally cost you your life. So I take my support network very seriously. Your health is your support network, even during this pandemic. Pay attention to those who are around you during this time, to those to make an effort towards you, even though they can't physically be around you. Because those are the people that you should invest your time into. My biggest regret is not letting go of fair weather friends sooner. If I had done so, my life would have been so much better. Even now, during the pandemic, when circumstances are not ideal, people's true colors are showing. And unfortunately, people are showing that some of them are not an ideal for being in your close social circle. It's hard to let go of people, but you have to set boundaries for yourself. I choose to surround myself with people that care about me in great times and during a pandemic. I choose to be well. So I hold close I choose to hold people close to me that step up during difficult times. It's not black and white, but a psychiatrist once said to me that there are many different levels of friendship. There's coffee friends, shopping friends, but you should be very careful of those that you let into your elite inner core, because not everyone is cut out to be a best friend. And your support network is your well being. And that is my story about mental health.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because I think I know I can relate, and probably Adriana as well. That feeling of being left when the chips are down, or when you share a diagnosis. I know that's happened in my world. A diagnosis is just somehow too big for some people. And when you said the part about your boyfriend or your ex-boyfriend not wanting the responsibility,
Yeah.
I think that's a huge important point to underscore, is that I never asked you to be responsible for me, and yet that's where people go. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
tend to think that, well, now suddenly you have become a burden
Yeah.
instantaneously,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's interesting because you don't, that's not necessarily where you're going with this. You're the same person. You have to, manage your life differently, and it's difficult. But I think there are some people in our lives that just, it's too big, and they take that giant step back, and some of them take several steps back and drop off altogether. But I don't know. I think that's good information to have.
It was also really, really funny, like when I had come to, because some people didn't think I was going to make it like through, that I was just going to be in psychosis forever. And so it was like, I would message people like, hey, I'm good now. How are you? And they're like, oh, you're good now. Oh. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like, sometimes, it is like an illness, like getting sick, you get better. And like, could you imagine if someone's, and I think this has happened to some people, but if someone's like, hey, I've got cancer, and some people are like, well, it looks like times are gonna get tough. I'm gonna go. Like,
Yep.
would that be socially acceptable? And like, when somebody makes it through that and then they're well, it's like, then people are like, oh, you mean it was like a temporary state? It's like, yes, it's an illness. Like, people are gonna get better. They're gonna get through it. It's a temporary state. They'll be well again. They'll be your friend again.
It's like coming down with the flu for your,
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that people that don't have any experience with mental illness in particular, um, it almost seems like it's everlasting. It's a curse. It's a label that's on you forever and ever, and you'll never somehow be able to be the friend that you once were, or be the kid that you once were, or whatever. It really it's interesting to see how people take the information, process the information, and then how they behave after they have that information. I don't know.
I just because you were mentioning about the different types of friends, and this
Mm-hmm.
is where my mind goes. You were saying like the coffee friend, the shopping friend, and then the close friend. My mom would always say, "You have friends for a reason, a season, or a lifetime." And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I've divided it up. And having gone through grief that annihilated my life, like it's really like there's a BC, an AD kind of thing. Like it's
Yeah.
a very big divide. And it sounds like you went through something like that too, where it's like there was before all of this and now there's the after.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend, we were together for 3.5 years, living together happily. As soon as my brother died, he was like, oh, you need your family. And I was like, yeah, please come with me. And he's like, oh, no, 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 I'm not your family. And
Whoa.
basically, yeah, like just drop me like a hot potato. So I can empathize and I can sympathize in the sense of being left and like that feeling of abandonment. And it's taken 10 years. Thank you, therapy. Um, and whatever adulting and leveling up you go through by having to go through that kind of thing, which I'm hearing you're in it, you're doing it too. But like, tell me if this sounds familiar, that uh the anger, the rage that I had for him will never go away completely. I mean, let's be honest here. I'm a redhead and I will always hate him. No qualms. Forgiveness, please. But I can forgive myself for, and I can forgive the situation for him not being adult enough, not being a complete human yet, like that we were like, age has nothing to do with it, but like maturity and like him not being able to level up and put on his cowboy chaps. I don't want to say big boy pants, big girl pants. Just put on some pants, man. Right? Like put on some pants and be there for me. But that for whatever reason, and that abandonment, and that I can look back 10 years later and be like, wow, man, you just didn't have the capacity. And
Yeah.
look at all of these friends, these so-called, and I hope you hear the air quotes, friends,
Yes.
who likewise faded into the sunset, or again, like hot potatoed. Like there were some people that were just like, and I'm out. Peace.
Literally.
You're not, like you're not gonna get drunk with me and like just like be the fun party girl type. Cool. Bye. Things are getting real.
Yeah.
And then like you were saying that, but then those good friends, the capital F friends, the reason and lifetime friends instead of seasonal, really found me. Like I was a magnet for that, and that was also intimidating.
Yeah.
Like, did you find like, whoa, shit's getting real, and now like these friends are like a completely different type of friend?
Yeah, it was, I remember at first it was really almost uncomfortable. Like I almost denied visits to the hospital because I mean, the breakup had made me feel so unbelievably embarrassed that I was there to begin with. So I just didn't want people to see me like this. So it's really a shame that it forced me to, like, I maybe could have had more of a support network if I wasn't so completely ashamed of having a mental illness. But yeah, it did surprise me, the people that stepped up, and now I've become a lot more comfortable with having a better support network. I think I was just, this happened when I was, I think, 31. So it's about that time where you're growing up and you're getting different values, and you're trying to be cool. You're trying to be so cool during those earlier like years of your life, and then you realize like, actually maybe abandoning your friend during a crisis isn't actually very cool.
Right?
Yeah, that doesn't fall under that category for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm always very envious, I have to say, of just because I'm a little bit older than you guys. And I wish in some ways that I came to some of these realizations earlier, because it took me a lot longer and I mismanaged my symptoms for decades. So when I got to be in my later 40s and the diagnosis was revamped, and I was so relieved that I was amazed. I thought, at this stage of the game, there's no way you're going to back away from me. And, you know, you do. I just love what you say, Adriana, because you say it. You've said it before, but capacity. That people don't have the capacity or the emotional maturity to handle what you're throwing at them, or what they feel that you're throwing at them. Because I keep coming back to, I didn't ask to be anyone's responsibility, and yet that was the automatic, oh shit, what am I going to have to do with her now? I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be that kind of friend. So they just dropped off altogether. But I'm only now at 52 starting to come into my own a little bit and be more open with it. This is who I am. And if you want to be in my orbit, then you can, but these are the rules.
Yeah. I just recently, changed the rules to a close friendship. And it was like during the pandemic, and I started showing signs of like having anxiety and having a bit of fear, and I was like, and that person literally just stopped contacting me, and I was like, okay, all right, here we are again. All right, well, at least I know, and I guess this is what this means, and I, like that I will get new friends, but this, like, I'll never invest into a friendship where people show signs of that ever again. Like, once people show signs of doing that, I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's like I love the phrase you hear when somebody behaves a certain way and it becomes, that's all I need to know about you. That phrase, as soon as somebody acts a certain way or does a certain way or takes a certain stance, that's all I need to know about you, and you make decisions whether they get to come into your orbit or not.
Yeah. And
have you allowed people to boomerang back, like from all of the diagnosis and from going through that journey? Have people come back to be like, hey, messed up?
Yes, but the ones that dropped off and boomeranged back are now on a different level. It's a different level of friendship. You've got the inner, and there, I have to say, I don't want my story to be completely negative. I wrote it quickly, and I hope I wrote it well enough, but I'm leaving out, there was one friend that came back and treated me extremely well. And she, during my mental illness, actually went and, like, she was an angel, got me groceries because I was afraid to leave my house, like, made sure that I was eating. And also, my best friends were my neighbors at the time. She knocked on their door. She knew them. She knocked on their door and said, Marlena is not well right now. And she was a teacher about to leave for a couple of months. She said, Marlena's not well, and I have to leave. So I'm worried about her. Would you check on her? And they said no.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, they said no. Yeah. These were people, my neighbors, like best friends' neighbors, moved there because they were there, to be closer to them in the neighborhood, and that's, and so it was like, so some of them have like come in, and like other best friends that, like, I'll just like Facebook message them, like, how are you doing? How are things? But things were really never the same. Like, once you see that side of someone, you're just never going to unsee it,
Yep.
That's a bit final there.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know about you.
Yeah. But the thing is, I look back and the signs were there. Like, I take responsibility for my role in that, because, like, I should have, like, I just didn't know what the repercussions of having a close social network that were like that would be directly to me. But, like, the signs were there. People do show signs of how they're going to step up during a crisis, And the thing is, if you're not prepared properly with a proper, like, social network, like, some terrible things can happen to you, if you don't have that set up, especially not just as a person who has a mental illness, everyone in general,
Yeah.
So.
Oh, it's a great story, Marlena. I'm so glad you shared it, because I was saying to Adriana before you joined us that it's a topic I think that everybody who listens to this podcast in one way or another has experienced at one level or another. And it's always good to hear how how people are managing it, and also not that we want to revel in someone's the negative side to the story, but also it's important to hear the impact, because if I'm listening, let's say, and maybe I'm one of the listeners who has a family member or a friend who's experiencing mental illness, it's really important for that person to hear the impact of their behavior, the fallout, right?
I mean, yeah, I actually, there's another, I don't know how, there's another part of this story that's even crazier.
Please.
Okay, all right, I'll tell you this. During this time when my boyfriend broke up with me, I had a friend who was also going through a breakdown. It was actually both of our boyfriends who got together and they were like, we can't handle this. Let's break up with our girlfriends and move in together. Yeah. No,
That's like a bad sitcom.
it is really. Now, here's where the story gets like really, really intense, is that what happened to me, I was just desperate to be well. I knew I was unwell. I think if I was an atheist, I probably would have gone to the whole like, ooh, God has chosen me. But I was like, I don't believe in God. There's something wrong with me. I've really got to listen to my doctor. So I really listened attentively. And I went, where my support networks failed, my mother actually really stepped up. So I listened to pretty much everything that my mom would say. I listened to what my doctors would say. I ended up moving back home with my family, which was really, really challenging. I had a great apartment in Toronto. I was totally hip. Everything was great. Now, my friend, she was not so lucky. She ended up actually being homeless. That's how she ended up being homeless for a significant amount of time, being on the streets, witnessing even more, like intense things, like that you can imagine. And it took her twice as long to get back on her feet. And it was partially because her family also, I think my mother learned pretty quickly, okay, the stigma, I don't care about the stigma. I just care about my daughter. I think my friend's family were a little bit more hesitant, about that. They reacted differently. And I obviously can't speak for her and I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that she did end up in homeless shelters for a significant amount of time. It took her years and years and years to get back on her feet, because that one boyfriend just couldn't handle it,
Ugh.
So
It's so heartbreaking to hear, because that's not just the stigma of mental illness. That's also a commentary on our economy, where a woman can't, or any person can't afford to live on their own.
Yeah.
Like that, you have to have that split income. And I know that, again, like there's these little ripple effects of how your situation really feeds into how well you can caregive to yourself. And I mean, that's a loaded conversation of the pyramid of needs, and like how many of those things you need before you can actually start saying, okay, now how do I look after my mental health? Because my daily life of like warmth and food and shelter, my goodness, like I'm so angry.
Yeah, it was a pretty horrifying circumstance, but like it was just like, I ended up getting, I think I was really lucky in a lot of ways, because I did get back on my feet. I've really fought hard to get my life back, a different kind of life that resembled some kind of normalcy. And so I was able to like send her some financial support every now and then. And she's doing pretty well now. I think the both of us will never be the same. We're forever changed. But I think about that circumstance and the two of them, the two boyfriends getting together, being like, we're tired of this. Let's just,
So it just reminds me of the Flintstones, like something Fred and Barney would do.
Yes.
Hey, as somebody who's nicknamed Pebbles, do not take this out on the Flintstones. Those guys,
You leave the Flintstones out of it.
they might be troglodytes, those assholes that you knew, but they are not the Flintstones.
I apologize. Well, this is I think I speak for both of us when I say it takes bravery and courage to share your story, and I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you answered the call when I reached out to you, because I just knew you had something that our listeners would benefit from hearing.
I'm so grateful. Yeah, I've always wanted to share my story and be and be helpful in some kind of way. It's sometimes I do comedy, sometimes, but it's you just never. I don't never want to make light of these things, like of these stories. Like so it's good that I had this format to share it with, so I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marlena. And you know what? And just off the record, I can be part of your inner circle.
Oh,
I'll put that on the record. Heck yeah, Mama.
And because I think people do come into our lives for reasons, and I know that's happened with Adriana and my relationship. We came into each other's lives for this reason, and the very reason that we're doing what we're doing now. So I think there's a reason that you and I met at the Second City. So.
That makes me so happy. Thank you so much, Lori. Likewise.
Thanks for listening. If you want to join the conversation, and we hope you do, come find us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can subscribe on YouTube. That's it, Stigma Fighters. And remember, your story isn't over yet, and we want to hear it.